Well, yesterday we mentioned Liz Truss, and as we said, she's one of the people who put their name forward to Britannia Unchained, the complete libertarian tract to essentially Thatcherism 2.0, and she is now the International Secretary for Trade. So, yeah, all those trade deals that are going to be, quote, fantastic, they're not. They're going to be absolutely diabolical for us. They may look good on paper, but they ain't going to be good for your average working man in the street. And almost certainly is going to put the NHS up for sale. Because I don't care what she says now, the NHS to a libertarian is a complete anathema to what they stand for. It just can't exist. So this comes from The Guardian. A Trump trade deal with Britain will unleash a bonfire of regulations, which is what we've said from the beginning about all this. Boris Johnson's ruthless reshuffle makes one thing very clear. Brexit is about giving the right wing of the Tory party the chance to finish the Thatcherite revolution. Johnson filled his government with the ultra-free market ideologues such as Priti Patel, Dominic Raab, Liz Truss and Kezia Keating, who in 2012 vowed to give a good kick to the British public, who they described as among the world's worst idlers. Their plan to, quote, unchain Britannia by declaring war on the bloated state with high taxes and excessive regulation is actually a plan to unchain big businesses, which they believe, astonishingly, has suffered from masses of over-regulation on the part of successive governments from Tony Blair to David Cameron. Right at the ideological heart of the group is Liz Truss, the founder of the Free Enterprise Group of Conservative MPs. Truss is a turbocharged Thatcherite who has now replaced Liam Fox as International Trade Secretary. She has repeatedly spoken of her desire to drive down taxes, cut back public spending and strip away regulations on everything from housing to education to the workplace. In Truss's mind, it would be a complete contradiction of the Brexit vote if it isn't and used to impose, quote, fiscal discipline and economic liberalism to give people power over their own money and their own lives. And this is how this stuff is sold. All that which she wants to do, which will be bad for every single working man and woman in the United Kingdom, is dressed up as if it's giving you some sort of freedom. You have the absolute freedom to be abused by your boss at work and forced to work God knows how many hours to be paid pittance. So, through the post-Brexit trade deals she now hopes to sign, she has been handed the perfect vehicle to inflict some of these policies on a deeply divided Britain. The trade deal that most excites Truss's brand of Conservatives is, of course, the one with the US. Many Brexiteers have looked longingly across the Atlantic for decades to an economy where business is free from the shackles of tax and regulation, which they see as a product of the European Union, an entity that competes with the Soviet Union for their disdain. Brexit gives them the opportunity to emulate the US model, and because modern trade deals are concerned less with tariffs and more about how a country is allowed to regulate food standards, run public services and treat overseas investors, a trade deal with the US would be a powerful mechanism of transforming our economy. Truss will see eye to eye with Donald Trump's administration. We know this because Trump's administration, unlike our own government, has told us exactly what it wants from a trade deal. It wants Britain to allow food produced in enormous animal factories pumped with steroids, hormones and antibiotics into our markets. It wants us to accept even greater monopoly rights for big pharmaceutical corporations, meaning higher prices for medication and more strain on the NHS. It wants to allow the Silicon Valley tech firms, from Amazon to Facebook and Google, to have greater power even use and abuse our data. and it wants to extend the rights of US corporations to enjoy the regulatory stability, even giving them the right to sue British government in secret corporate courts for daring to do such things as introduce a sugar tax or pass a law to stop fracking. 2 weeks ago, documents were leaked from the US trade talks that we nor our MPs have been allowed to see. They showed that the US is streets ahead of us in negotiating ability and fully prepared to use a trade deal to prize Britain away from the standards and protections we enjoy in the EU. The negotiators have been clear that we will not be able to introduce the sort of special tax on Silicon Valley corporations that Philip Hammond had proposed, and which is being introduced in France if we wanted a US trade deal. This should alarm us, but we will doubtless be music to the ears of Tris, who believes that we are, quote, a nation of Airbnb-ing, Deliveroo-eating, Uber-riding freedom fighters. She has criticised any attempt to control the overwhelming power of these corporations. When people have raised concerns about Airbnb in the tourist industry, or the cost of housing, her answer is simple: cut all regulations in those sectors. She's called for sweeping cuts to regulations in the workplace too, boasting about making it easier for employees to sack the idlers and make the country more efficient and productive. The problem with the railways isn't for Tris is that they are run for profit, but that they haven't been privatised enough. The problem with austerity isn't that it's gone too far or that it was necessary, but it wasn't anywhere near radical enough for anyone who disagrees must be part of the, quote, blob of vested interests that are seeking their own protection to waste the country's resources. Given that the trade deals now focus exclusively on regulation, they will give Tris a mechanism to drive forward this deregulation agenda. They are particularly useful mechanisms for politicians like Tris because they are so highly complicated agreements with almost no transparency or accountability to Parliament. During his time at the Department for International Trade, Liam Fox, once an advocate of parliamentary sovereignty, refused to give MPs any right to amend or stop trade deals, or even to see the texts being negotiated. The texts of the text being negotiated. When Parliament tried to give itself the power to stop trade deals earlier this year, Fox simply left his trade bill to die in the House of Lords. So Tris will be operating under the royal prerogative. What's more, as international treaties, these deals will take precedence over domestic law and can be difficult and time-consuming to extricate yourself from. So if we do sign a trade deal and it does away with all our hard-earned protections, we will have to fight unbelievably hard, tooth and nail, to try and get ourselves out of it, to a point where it may not even be possible. And you could have lost all your workers' rights because of it. And that's all down to Brexit and these people who have been pushing Brexit. Because a hard deal, no Brexit, finally gives them the chance to do what they want. So we are going to get an absolute bonfire of regulations if that deal happens, and that's why any deal should be stopped.